Good morning. So we're going to go ahead and finish the next part of our notes. Okay. So we're working on part 2 of 3.2 and how can we prove, how can we use proofs to prove our angle relationships. Because every day we're angling. Okay, got this. Okay, so we're going to do a couple different types of proofs for these. So our first one that we're going to use, so I'm going to draw a diagram. So I'll put my diagram over here. Okay, so we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Okay, this is a G, not a 6. Okay, so we're going to prove, so we're going to be given that R, okay, so R is parallel to S, and A and E are corresponding angles. Okay, so we're talking about A and E. So A and E right here. Remember, corresponding, same side, skip one. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we need to prove that angle A is congruent to angle H. Okay, so that's what we need to end up with. That's what we need to prove. Okay, so angle A is congruent to angle H. Okay, so that's what we need to end up with. Okay, so we're going to do that. Okay, so we're going to start, of course, everybody, with our givens. Okay, so our statements and our reasons. Just so you know, everybody, you can just write an S and an R for statement and reason. Okay, so we're going to start with our given. So line R is parallel to S, and angle A and angle E are corresponding. So that's what they give us. Okay, so those are our givens. Okay, so since angle A and angle E are corresponding, that means that they're congruent to each other. So angle A is congruent to angle E, and that's by our corresponding angle theorem. We also have that since angle A is congruent to angle E, that also means that angle H is congruent to angle E. Do y'all see that? Because they are vertical angles. Okay, and so that's by our vertical angles congruence theorem. Okay, so that means, everybody, that if angle A is congruent to angle E and angle E is congruent to angle H, then, okay, that means that angle A is congruent to angle H. Do you see that? Because both of them are congruent to angle E, and that's going to be by our transitive property of congruence. Okay, so let's do another example of this. So So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. This is R. This is S. Okay, and we're given that R is congruent to angle S. So sorry, the line R is parallel to S. Okay, and that angle B and F are corresponding angles. And we need to prove that angle B is congruent to angle G. Okay, so statements and reasons again. Okay, so we're going to prove. So we're going to write down our givens. And so R is parallel to S, and B and F are corresponding angles. And that everybody is our given. Okay, that always goes first. And then we're going to do, so we got that. So now we're going to say, so everybody, so this is, so B and F are corresponding. Okay, so then that means that we need to eventually get to that B and G. Okay, so those are, we need to prove that they are congruent. Okay, so given that, so since their angle B is congruent to angle F because they are corresponding angles, so we know they're congruent by our corresponding angle congruence theorem. Okay, angle F is congruent to angle B. Okay, and that's because they are sorry, I should have put G. I'm looking and I'm like, F is not near there. Okay, so F and G. Sorry, everybody, F and G. So these two. And they are across from each other, so they are vertical angles. So that's by our vertical angles congruence theorem. Okay, so what it means again, everybody, so if B is congruent to angle F and angle F is also congruent to angle G, then that means that angle B is congruent to angle G by our transitive property of congruence. So transitive property. Got that, everybody? Okay. So we also have, so let's say, so let's switch it up. What if we have numbers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, we got those. Okay, so let's say that we're given, this is line M, so we are given, so just kind of space between these. Okay, so we are given that line L is parallel to line M, and we need to prove that angle L is congruent to angle 8. So we're going to go ahead and do our statement. And our reasons. Okay, so we need to prove, so we're always going to start with our given angle L, line L is parallel to line M. That's our given. Okay, since we know that those two are, we need to eventually prove that this and 8, okay, everybody, are congruent. Well, I know that angle 3, 1, and 4. Okay, everybody are vertical angles. So we know that they're congruent to each other by our vertical angles congruence theorem. Okay, so since we know that those are congruent, we know that angle 4 and angle 8 are congruent because they are corresponding angles. So angle 4 is congruent to angle 8 by our corresponding angles theorem. And so now we're ready to prove, right? Because angle 1 is congruent to angle 4, and angle 4 is congruent to angle 8. Okay, so that means that they are both congruent to angle 4. So then, therefore, then they're both congruent to each other by our transitive property. Okay, so by our transitive property. Okay, so we are still going to keep working. I have another proof to do. Okay, so this is part 2, 3.2 continued, everybody. So we're still working on that. Today is not March. I'm going back in time. Okay, so we need to do another proof. Okay, so we need to prove I'm recording. Okay, so we're still working on our proofs. Okay, so we are given, okay, so this is for our two lines. So we have R and S. So we are given that line R is parallel to line S, and that D and H are corresponding angles. Okay. We need to prove that angle B and H are supplementary. Okay, that they're supplementary angles. Okay, so we're given that D and H are corresponding, and we need to prove that B and H, so that B and H are supplementary. Okay, so that's our last part that we need to do right there. Okay, so we're gonna do our two-column proof. Everybody remember you can just do an S for statements and an R for reason. It's totally up to you. This is a little bit longer proof for everybody. I'm just letting you know. Okay, so of course we're going to start with our givens, our gibbies. Okay, so those are our givens. And we need to prove that D and H, so since it says D and H are corresponding angles, that means that angle D is congruent to angle H, and we know that by our corresponding angle congruence theorem. Okay. D is equal to angle H by our definition of congruence. So definition of congruent. Okay, we know that D and B are linear pairs. Okay, so that's definition of a linear pair. That also means that D and angle D and B are supplementary. And that's by our linear pair postulate. Okay, so that means that angle B plus angle D is equal to 180 degrees, and that's by definition of supplementary. So our definition of supplementary angles, when we add them together, okay, and then we can do substitution. So I'm going to substitute in angle H for angle D, because remember, angle D is congruent to angle, is equal to angle H, so I can substitute it in. So I'm going to do substitution. Chelsea, so that's the part that we're changing, so we're doing substitution. Okay, so that means that angle B plus angle H is supplementary. So that means that angle B and angle H are supplementary because they, when you add them together, they equal 180 degrees. So that's definition of supplementary. We got this, everybody.